right? Lorraine, you can confirm that? We discussed everything even up to CIS controls.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we did.
super. Any questions? From last week? Okay, no questions. That means we are doing very well. So Lorraine, based on our training plan, week two is Entra, right? No, let me just check. I'm looking at I have too many windows open. Week two is an overview of Microsoft security solutions, correct?
Yes, Prof. Microsoft Defense, just hold on. Yes, describe the capabilities of Microsoft security solutions.
Now, today we're going to cover week 2 and week 3. Like, we're going to stretch it. So that's why I want us to jump right in, because we're going to do an overview of Microsoft security solutions. So the idea here is we'll complete SC900. By next week, everyone should be done with SC900 content, okay? And you should even be ready to book the SC900 exam. Is that okay? Like, you should be ready to sit the exam. And before we start, I just want to make a quick announcement. And for this one, I will bring in this slide. It's in a way we're going to be keeping a record of the sessions we've had. So today we have a talk, eh? You know that, eh? Lorraine, have you pushed that information as an announcement?
Not yet, but Jen already provided it.
You can see my screen? You can see my screen with the picture?
Yes, Prof. Yes,
okay,
Prof.
super. Yeah, okay, great. So we have an evening talk on introduction to application security. So this one, none of you can miss or should miss. So please tell your friends. I'll announce it also as we get to the end of the session. And I just want to make sure we're recording as we begin. Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. All right, so please mark your, what do you call it? Set an alarm, a reminder for 7 o'clock. You can just do it now so that you don't miss it. So we have that talk coming at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. We had a great talk last week, Cindy, with Irene taking us through the cybersecurity careers. And if you remember also the week before that, we also had someone talking to us about that, launching your cybersecurity career. So you guys have had the benefit of two sessions just guiding you about your careers and your career choices. We'll be also having other engineers, Microsoft engineers speaking to us. Please take note of some of the things we cover in today's class because they'll be very essential even as we get into your AZ204 for software security, right? So let's start with an overview of Microsoft solutions. There are quite a number, and we'll mention them. And some of them are covered in detail in different certifications. And I'll point you to those. And even the Microsoft Learn content is available to you, even if you don't sit the exam. If you wanted to just delve into any of the specific ones, you can. And you have also some credit for your Azure, so you can try out some of these features. So you're welcome to do that. So let's start with the denial of service protection. So what you need to know is that Microsoft gives protection for resources on the cloud. Any of your resources hosted on the cloud enjoy denial of service attack protection. So one thing you need to note is that there is the one that comes, the basic feature that comes included that is free, and it's a default service. But then there's also a paid service that has some enhancements, okay? The paid service that has enhancements will give you a little bit more. It will be based on some additional features relating to, I'm just reading them out. These are the value-added services. Rapid response support. You'll have web application firewall activated for some specific applications. That is now a paid service, okay? But the one that comes free of charge and integrated will basically be protecting you against, like what you can see there, any of your customers accessing through the Azure portal, they will be coming through with an Azure denial of service attack protection, okay? Now, probably I can give you a page where this is clearly outlined, what is paid and what is free. So let me just probably do that. Subscription and the costs. There we go. So the basic is the standard. Sorry, the basic is free. Let me take you to the cheat sheet. And you have another one that is paid at $29.5 for network protection and $199 for per IP protection. So let me just take you to this pricing guide. So I'm just going to drop it on the chat, but feel free to also explore it. Let me just show you where it is. Even if you just Googled it, you'll see the per protection pricing. It's good when you know this. There's a network protection, 2 tiers, network and then IP protection. The network protection is for virtual networks, and we're going to describe that. And it's enabled to all the resources in your VNet. And IP protection is per resource, like for, it's based on public IP address, and it's now enabled on that. Then you also have this pricing. There's one which I was looking for, which is like, so this particular page gives you a way in which you can explore and do your costing. You see, there's also per region pricing, but what I was basically telling you is the same. There's a network protection with the charge there, the fixed charge, and then IP protection with a fixed monthly charge, right? So anyway, but do you understand the service? What's a denial of service attack? Denial of service attack is basically where attackers target your resources to overwhelm them, right? To basically overwhelm them so that they crash, so that they're not able to be to respond to legitimate requests. Yeah. So you can see here also, it will discard the traffic that looks like it's an attack. It will be giving you also real time. Also, it'll be giving you telemetry, basically logging information and alerting that will let you know, issues, the denial of service attack that is in progress. Another service, the Azure Firewall. So the Azure Firewall is a feature that you can activate, and you can see here, we'll be talking about what a virtual network is, but whatever you deploy to the cloud is given an IP address and is put on a virtual network segment. So this element of virtual networking is also sometimes called the VPC, the virtual private cloud. So it's like you have a piece of the cloud to yourself and to your resources, like your organizational resources. So what you can do is you can activate the Azure Firewall such that anyone accessing your resource, first of all, goes to the firewall, and then the firewall forwards that to your resources on the cloud. And what a firewall does, it makes decisions, either allow or deny decisions to the incoming traffic or even to outgoing traffic. And that is what is called filtering. Now, the Azure firewall will have rules. So what you need to do is there'll be some default rules that come that Azure recommends, and they'll be there and activated when you create the firewall. But you can also put in your custom rules, and the rules that are the rules are actually evaluated from top down, from the highest priority rules to the lower priority rules. And if a rule matches and allow, it doesn't even need to continue to the lower. So it does this on a per rule basis and matches the rules, and the activity, the action basically determines the exit point. So if a higher priority rule allows, then allow applies. If there is no rule that matches until the very end of the entire list of the rules, there's a default rule, which is a deny rule. So it's a default deny sequence, right? Something else to note about the Azure firewall is that it takes in also threat intelligence feeds from Microsoft. So Azure firewall is always fed in, like if Microsoft, the security community, or basically the intelligence feeds coming from all over the world spot a particular issue, indicator of compromise, or an issue that needs to be addressed with malicious, maybe IP or a domain that's associated with some malicious use, such information is fed into the Azure firewall, and it gives you some real-time protection of current threats, currently active threats, so that your resources are also protected from that, okay? Yeah, so so any of your resources, so if you can look at Spoke 1, Spoke 2, those are in the cloud. They could be in your virtual network on the cloud. These resources could be behind the firewall, and they have a private IP address, so they're like not exposed to the internet. When they need to send out something to the internet, the Azure firewall could also be doing what we call network address translation work. And that network address translation work goes out to basically the firewall protects and forwards any traffic outside to the outside internet. Any traffic coming in from the internet is filtered as well, and then goes to your internal resources on the cloud, okay? All right, so I'm also checking for questions. If you have any questions, just lift up your hand. Also to know that you can also protect applications, and there's a specific service offering called the Web Application Firewall for web applications. So if you're hosting web applications, functions that are exposed to users on the internet, you can see some of the diagrams here that of things that can be protected. Including, you can see here some elements of IoT, some form of sensor access. If you have people, organizations, just different things that are coming in. Even also code, automated code that is trying to, because sometimes attackers will be doing things using some automated scripts. So if you have any of that trying to access your resources on the cloud, they would go through the Web Application Firewall. So you can activate a Web Application Firewall. Now, a Web Application Firewall will be operating at layer 7 and will be monitoring for the common attacks that are known to target web applications, right? So if you've hosted some code on your Azure platform and you've deployed it and it's being accessible by all these different types of access, even API endpoints that you've exposed, you can actually have them behind the Web Application Firewall. And that will filter for the commonly known attacks, and it will know the patterns of an attack. It will have been trained. The Web Application Firewall is trained to detect those patterns those signatures, those ways of identifying the attack, and it will basically stop it. It will only forward what it considers safe now to your backend infrastructure. Okay. Yes. And you can see here that the web application firewall can protect your on-premise. So you could direct connectivity through the WAF, and then the WAF forwards to your on-premise infrastructure. But it can also be from the WAF to the Microsoft infrastructure and your resources deployed within Azure. But it can also be from the web application firewall to other cloud. This is now in the case of multi-cloud deployments. Okay. So you can also see that it will be tracking specific vulnerabilities and also alerting you and giving you recommendations for enhanced security. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, you can raise them. I've already said this is layer 7. I hope you also caught that. And it will also have denial of service attack protection. The WAF also provides denial of service attack protection. Yeah. So you don't have to just do DDoS on its own. The WAF will have that included. Now let's talk about this element of virtual network. And I don't know whether I demonstrated this in the last class, but we can do this when I get to the demos. We'll create a resource. You'll see any resource we create on the cloud is in what we are calling our virtual private cloud. It's like we have this virtual section in the cloud, in the Azure cloud, that is belonging to us and our resources. It will have a private IP address. Our resources will be allocated private IP addresses by default and not public. So whatever we deploy in our VNet is not publicly accessible unless we explicitly do that. The common practice is that we deploy resources that work together in the same VNet. So for example, if I have some virtual machines that work with a specific database, they need to be in the same VNet. And by default, resources that are in the same VNet will work together. All right. So they will be like in the same, if you want to think about it as a folder, they'll be in the same like folder or network, which basically allows them to communicate with each other. Now, if I have resources that don't generally communicate with each other, I can have them in different VNets, but I can also configure the two VNets to talk to each other, which is fine, and that can be enabled. And these two VNets, the recommended best practice is to have them in the same region, right? VNets should be in the same region. So like if I deploy resources in the US East, I can group the resources that generally work together in their own VNets, but I can have multiple VNets within US East, and I can configure them to work together. I could also have VNets in a different region, and what I'd need to set up is peering. We can also set up VNet peering so that they can work with other VNets that are in different regions, but that will need to be configured as well, okay? What else do we need to mention? So the idea is to group related assets, isolate these resources from the others, and you can set up policies. So one of the ways in which you can enable policies is to do that per VNet. Like if I have some specific policies relating to how I want to filter, how I want to track and create audit trails, I can apply those policies to those VNets, okay? So the idea here is the zero trust. Let me just highlight something about zero trust. Zero trust requires us to segment. So part of the reason why, and I need to emphasize this, part of the reason why you need to put resources in different VNets is the element of segmentation. So put the resources that work together in the same VNet. These are the ones that will regularly work together and communicate. If there are some resources that don't work together very regularly, put them in separate VNets and configure rules to now allow that communication. That is part of segmentation. And that segmentation is part of zero trust. Do you remember? We don't have a flat network. Please, as part of defense in depth, don't just put everything in one VNet, right? If you put everything in one VNet, that's considered flat. So that if somebody compromises one resource, they have access to all your cloud resources. That's not recommended. So only put the resources that work very closely together in the same VNet. Otherwise, always segment and then implement the rules that allow inter-VNet communication as part of securing and protecting your workloads from a flat once, like when somebody compromises, they don't have access to everything. Okay, so you contain. Yes, what else do I need to just confirm about that? We'll be seeing that in the demo. And a VNet is like similar to the way you do a VLAN in your traditional network segmentation. So you don't have everything in the same VLAN, right? Yeah. So you'd have multiple VNets in order to allow for better security, okay, and containment. Is that clear? So the other thing is after VNets is network security groups, and there's also ASGs. So this is NSGs, but we also say that there's ASGs and NSGs. These are basically rules that you write. These rules are typically layer 3 and layer 4 rules, okay? So this is how you distinguish the firewall rules and the NSG rules. Firewall rules are through the entire stack from layer 7, right? You can basically build rules all the way to layer 7 in the firewall. But for NSGs, you typically write rules up to layer 3, 4, okay? And they use 5 attributes. So NSGs use 5 attributes to make decisions to either allow or deny network-related traffic. They will use IP address, source IP, and destination IP. Those are 2 different values. Source port and destination port, those make 4. And then protocol, that's the 5th. So they use 5 key points, 5 information points to decide whether to allow traffic or not to allow traffic when you're writing the network security group rules. And you'll see them. The reason why they're called a group is it's a collection of rules. And these rules apply to either inbound or outbound traffic. And they make decisions on either to allow or deny. All right. Now, the other thing is that these rules are processed based on priority. And I'll be illustrating that in the demo, such that the rules that are at the top are applied first, and the rules that are at the bottom last. And you're looking to match. If at the end of the rule base there's no match, the default is a deny. Okay. All right. And please remember, when you create the NSG, Azure will give you some default rules. You'll see there'll be some default inbound and outbound rules, and I'll do that in the demo. So I'll do a collection of demos. There's one specific demo that I'll do for NSGs, so I'll come to that. But just keep that in mind. The other thing we want to see is the element of the bastion hosts. And now just understand this. Is the reason why we have these different features is we never allow public access to our Azure resources. So if you create a virtual machine on the cloud, it will not have access from the internet by default. By default, the resource will just be within the private access of the cloud. Resources, inter-resource communication in the cloud. Now, if you want to enable that resource to be accessed over the internet, you have the option now of the things that we've introduced so far. You can have that resource behind like the firewall. Now, the other option you have is to have the access enabled through NSGs, network security rules that allow public access, and you'll need to give a public IP address. But the other way of doing this is using the Bastion host. So let me explain the Bastion host. So the Bastion host is basically a machine that is managed it's a fully managed solution by Microsoft. So Microsoft is the one that manages it, and Microsoft hardens. So Microsoft hardens the Bastion host. And what the Bastion, that's why it's called the Azure Bastion. What the Bastion host does is that it exposes itself to the internet. So if somebody is trying to access, they'll go through the Bastion host first, and it typically exposes two particular ports, SSH and RDP. And it's considered as a hardened instance, right? It's a hardened resource that is managed by Microsoft. Now, what will happen is the port that is open, like SSH or RDP, exposes the Bastion host. Connectivity is allowed to the Bastion host. And then the Bastion host is the one that relays the connectivity to your back-end resources. So the Bastion host could be the connection point, and then the Bastion host enables you to connect to your other VMs. The other VMs are not publicly exposed. They're still having private IPs, so they are not accessible directly. They are only accessible through the Bastion host. Now, you can configure the rules for filtering from the internet to the Bastion host. So you can have some specific rules, NSG rules from the internet to your Bastion host. And you can also have internal NSG rules from the Bastion host to your VMs. All right. So what does this do? What this does is that the Bastion host is hardened. It's less likely to succumb to directed attacks from the internet, right? It's also managed by Microsoft. So Microsoft has the threat intelligence and all the additional threat protections that come from its understanding of what's going on all over the world. And the other thing is that your internal resources are not exposed through public IPs. The only public IP that is exposed is of your Bastion host, right? This will also have protections against port scanning. So they're just this very common attacks that you'll always see whenever you open a public IP. Immediately you expose a public IP, among the first things you'll ever get is this scanning. Also malware, there's just malware crawling on the internet. So you usually get to see those. And remember, because it's being managed by Microsoft, if Microsoft sees any 0 days or any new attacks, the Bastion hosts will receive that update and will be strengthened against those attacks, okay? The other resource that is available for security is the Key Vault, okay? Now, the Key Vault is a location for storing secrets. Secrets could be in the form of passwords, but it could also be in the form of tokens, like API tokens, and session keys that need to be managed. Okay, so we usually say these API keys, these passwords, also certificates or cryptographic keys. These are the things that should be stored in the Key Vault. These should never be in the code, because what application developers sometimes do is they think they've hidden it in the code by, just basically having some element of this being in a configuration file or something like that. And they think that by them managing their configuration file, that's secure. So it's actually discouraged. Never put any keys, any passwords, any tokens in your code. What you need to do is make reference to the Key Vault. And what happens is you get a URI that references the key that is in the Key Vault. The Key Vault will be the one that will basically do the authentication. It will handle that, and the signing, if it's cryptographic signing, the Key Vault will handle that, so that you minimize the exposure of your secrets and your keys. The Key Vault will also be giving you, it will just basically monitor and log the use of your keys, and you'll have a simplified one location for handling all your secrets, and that will basically enhance your security than these keys being everywhere in your configuration files and in your code. So there's the element of the standard key vault, which is a software-based key vault, but there's also the hardware security module, or HSM, which is available through like a premium licensing, which is managed by a hardware component, okay? Not just the software component, okay? That's called the HSM. All right. So the Key Vault gives you centralized access, centralized management of your keys. You're able to monitor them and also be able to manage them. Right. So that's the Key Vault. We can go to the next section, which is just managing, just understanding the security capabilities of protecting your network. And I'll also be talking about the different security policies and also talking about Defender. So we'll do a demo on Defender as well. So I'll do a demo on the network security groups and the rules, and I'll even show you how you can enable the firewall and the denial of service attack protections. And we'll also get into Defender. So let's discuss Defender. So Defender is a cloud native application protection platform, and you can see that CNAP. You can activate it for, there are many different types of Defender activations. One of them is the Defender for Cloud, which is now the cloud native application protection platform. Now, what you need to know is that it will be able to do security defenses for your cloud apps, all right? So if you have any cloud-based applications, you'll be able to enable Defender for Cloud to protect those applications from attack. It is a Microsoft managed service, so it will also have threat intelligence feeds from Microsoft that can protect your cloud apps. And you can see from here the different things that it can do. So you can see it can protect your apps, yes, but it can also check your attack surface by looking at how you've configured. So when you look at the cloud security posture management, it will look at basically how you've basically set up your security posture, how you've configured, and it will even give you recommendations on how you can improve your security posture. And we'll be looking at that. So you will even have like a Defender for Cloud security score and recommendations, and I'll be showing you that. The other thing it will do, it will look at any servers you've deployed, your VMs, your containers, your storage, your databases, the ones that you've deployed on the cloud, and it will give you a review. So this is now the workload protection. It will give you a review of those deployed resources and tell you how you can enhance the security of those resources, okay? It also has the features for DevSecOps. So you're able to do your CI/CD pipelines, your multi-pipeline deployments. It's able to give you security recommendations for your DevOps stages. So it will integrate security in your DevOps CI/CD pipelines. So part of that, what it can do is source code scanning. So it can scan your source code and tell you if your source code has security weaknesses. It can even recommend coding best practices that you've not adhered in your code and give you recommendations, right? It can also look at your build process and integrate security scanning. And there's a static and dynamic scanning. And it can also give you reports. When you push your code, you build, you can integrate security scans. It can also give you security checks when you deploy. So CI/CD involves the whole coding, building, deploying, but also monitor the running of your code throughout its life cycle. Okay. So we'll also be discussing DevOps as part of your training, and we'll be discussing this and integrating that in your DevOps. You'll be seeing that. So here's a screenshot of the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and we'll be doing this in the demo as well, and you'll be seeing how to activate Defender for Cloud. It's a paid, you'll need to activate it. It's a paid service, okay? And you have some credits. In your Azure credit, you have credit that you can use to already start seeing how the service works. I'm actually trying to see my mouse, where my mouse is. So you'll be able to see the service and how it works. And one of the things I want you to notice over here is that you have the benchmarks. You can, so number one, by default, you have the security, Microsoft security benchmark, which is what Microsoft has said at a minimum, your resources on Azure should meet. So if any of your resources on Azure don't meet the minimum requirements from the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, it will alert you. So on this slide, you can see the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark has 59 controls that you need to meet. And this is at the lowest level of compliance. But of course, you can always do better. But at the minimum basis from Microsoft, it will match the Defender for Cloud will alert you if you don't meet any of those minimum requirements. Now, in addition, we talked about other best practices like the ISO 27000, right? PCI DSS. So if you have the additional checks from those other best practice standards, best practice regulations, best practice legal, in fact, some of them could even be legal requirements. So you can basically enable those and also have additional checks. So on this slide, you can see there are additional checks. In this case, SOC TSP, PCI DSS, and ISO 27000 have added additional checks. And your resources are also being checked against that. And you can also pull this from your dashboard for reporting. So this is part of your regulatory compliance dashboard reporting, which you can also provide in case you have an audit and just show this report, okay? So all this is facilitated by Defender for Cloud. All right. Here's an example of the Defender for Cloud with a security score for cloud security posture management. You have a security score of 58%, which is 35 out of 60 points. So you can see this will be activated for your resources, but also for your subscription. So you can see at a subscription level, all the resources deployed under that subscription, right? And it will aggregate that into one security score. It will have recommendations for hardening. Basically, it will identify where you have security misconfigurations and weaknesses and give you recommendations on how you can enhance your security posture. So that's the security posture management. Yeah. And the other thing is this can be done multi-cloud. So if you have AWS, you can still centralize this onto this dashboard by looking at your AWS deployment. If you have GCP, it can also bring that in. And you have one unified dashboard for your AWS and GCP resources. Is that okay? So this is also workload protection. So if you have, just give me a second. I just need to take a glass of water. My throat is, I've been at this for a while now. I just need to stretch a bit. Give me a second. All right, I'm back. Sorry for that. I just needed a quick break. So this is now the cloud workload protection. And whenever you hear the term workload, you're thinking of a resource that is deployed on the cloud. This can be a virtual machine. This can be an application. This can be a function, like just a piece of code that you can call through an API, right? So that's your workload. It's running on the cloud. It's a container. It can be a container, right? That's your workload. So what this is basically talking to you about is the features, the security features you can enable, and Microsoft Defender for Cloud is able to track for your services on the cloud. So it will do endpoint detection and response. So like if you had a VM, Defender for Cloud is able to do the management of that endpoint, that virtual machine, and it's able to do even vulnerability scanning. So if you have a piece of code, it can do a vulnerability scanning and tell you where the deficiencies are, the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses are. We've also talked about multi-cloud. Multi-cloud, whenever you hear the term multi-cloud, is that you have more than one cloud provider. So these integrations can work on AWS and GCP. And it's also hybrid. Hybrid, whenever you hear the term hybrid, you have some on-premise, you have something running on-premise, and you also have collaboration with the cloud. That's hybrid, right? Yeah. So you can see here, enable the enhanced security features for multi-cloud, for Defender for Cloud. You can see that. And when you enable them, it will be able to check for you these different things. I think we've even looked at some of them. So it's a bit of, there's an overlap here, but we'll be able to see that in the demo. DevSecOps, we've mentioned that. So where you're able to do the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, you're able to link it to a repository, like a GitHub repository. So can you have a look at this diagram? You have a connector to your GitHub, and also you have a connector to DevOps. So Azure DevOps platform. And I'll even demonstrate this. With Azure DevOps, you're able to build your CI/CD pipelines. Same thing for GitHub. So even within GitHub, and remember GitHub is owned by Microsoft now, right? They bought it out. So you're also able to integrate Defender for Cloud by connecting it to your GitHub. And it's also able to integrate with this CI/CD pipeline for DevOps on GitHub and Azure DevOps. And in this case, you can see it's done some checks. It's found some vulnerabilities. It's able to give you a dashboard. There are 39 high, 195 medium, and 0 low. So it's primarily on high end, medium. And you can see this have been, how has it come up with this? It's come up with this through code scanning. It's come up with this through identifying secrets that are exposed. Remember, you're meant to protect your secrets through Key Vault. So you've not activated Key Vault. You probably have a configuration file which has some secrets, all right? You have some things in code like a password or a API key somewhere in your code, and it's exposed. Operating system vulnerabilities, it has found some that need to be plugged, right? And it has some recommendations that if you follow, you can remediate. You can remediate these issues, right? So it has a step-by-step walkthrough for you. If you followed that, you can follow that and remediate your issues. Does that make sense? And we're going to be looking at that. I also want to mention Sentinel, and we'll be doing multi-demo. Like we'll have many demos when we move to the demo section. So Sentinel is the security incident and event management solution that is on the cloud. And what does that mean? Sentinel will pull logs from different places. It will pull in logs from different places and centralize those logs It will pull logs from your VMs. It will pull logs from your containers. It will pull logs from your identity and access management like Entra. It will pull logs from your workloads, right? If you have any apps running and they're generating events, it will pull logs from there, all right? So it will pull these logs into a central place. It will correlate those logs, basically give you a unified view, and it will be able to detect any anomalies, basically incidents that report some compromise of your security, and it will generate those alerts and create tickets. It will create tickets that your security analysts need to analyze and review, okay? And that's basically what we call an incident. It will basically raise those tickets, and those incidents need to be analyzed by the analyst until they're resolved. When the incident is closed, it means somebody basically reviewed that and then closed it. Now, another feature that Sentinel has, which is beyond the SIEM, is the automated response. You see, with the SIEM feature, it needs an analyst. It needs a human being to look at those alerts that have been generated and the tickets that have been raised, and the analyst needs to investigate and then close. Now, with the automated response, you can have what are called workflows or playbooks, which when an incident triggers those workflows, and those triggers usually will be in the form of when an alert is raised from the SIEM, the SOA will be able to activate specific actions when the trigger comes. And we'll be seeing that. So now the playbook is basically an automated workflow. When the trigger comes, it does this, then it does that, and then it does that, right? You can specify some specific actions, right? And when the entire workflow is completed, you will have automated a response that can sufficiently address an incident up to a specific level and mitigate the issue, okay? Is that clear? I'm not seeing any questions. I'm not seeing any hands raised or anything like that. So I'm assuming things are good, right, Lorraine? All right, Mordecai has a question. So let me see where, Mordecai, you can ask your question.
Yeah, mine is with regards to Microsoft Defender specifically. Now, we have some tools that we use, for example, to look at vulnerability that is present in code. So a good example is actually Snyk, which I've been using
Snyk,
for quite some time, and Snyk it's quite good when it comes to detecting these vulnerabilities. So is it possible for us to, let's say, integrate some of these tools, or like is Microsoft Defender and the whole platform itself sufficient enough to make sure everything is done?
So what Microsoft does, it has integrations with some of these tools. So it has a marketplace, and I think you even see this if, so you've mentioned Snyk, most probably you're writing code on code, or what is it called, Visual Studio or Code. And what you see usually is there's a marketplace where you can bring in some tools. So those same elements of bringing tools that are third-party tools, you can do that. So they're not just only Microsoft tools. There are some other tools that are developed by third parties, but they can be integrated. So like, for example, using Snyk as one of the ones you've mentioned, and by the way, we'll have labs, and Snyk is one of the labs we will do. So with Snyk, you can integrate Snyk in the CI/CD. So Snyk can do a source code review, and it can generate a report on weaknesses. Cindy, and you know that, right? So what I can do is I can actually integrate Snyk into my CI/CD pipeline, including what to do based on the report that Snyk generates, whether I allow that code to finally go into build and production, or whether I will interrupt based on the Snyk report and have the developers remediate those issues first before that code is actually deployed, right? So what the long and short of it, TLDR, is that, yes, you can have third-party tools integrated in addition to the Microsoft default. And Microsoft has a marketplace integration, which allows for that. Sawa. I hope that answers.
Yeah, it's
All right.
answered.
And by the way, let me just also say, we'll be inviting engineers. So we have a calendar. We have a calendar of different engineers who will be coming to speak. And just to give you a sneak peek as to, and I'm not overcommitting, hopefully I'm not overcommitting, but I'm just basically telling you the ones we have requested for, right? Let me just tell you the ones we've requested for. And I'm just going to read that. And we're even in a conversation with Irene on that. You know, just the same way Irene came and spoke, and she basically gave an overview of the cybersecurity profession and the different ones that they hire from Microsoft, right? So we'll have a guest speaker on GitHub. So somebody who is a Microsoft engineer, and they're gonna give you like some really good insights into GitHub. So if you have GitHub questions, just come with them. We'll have somebody who's going to walk through us on Entra. And Entra is actually one of the components even though you're still doing software security, you need to know how Entra can also assist you. And there's even a video I've lined up that we're going to watch on this whole element of tokens, how you can configure your apps for authentication. So remember, identity is also associated with your applications, right? So how do you manage identity for applications so that your keys are not compromised, and this whole element around tokens? Because a lot of security breaches on apps and a lot of these deployments for applications and code, they're usually breaches relating to authentication issues. Some keys have not been handled well and they've been exposed, and hackers are able to get access, right? So we'll have a whole session on identity and access management. And I'll give you a small video which we'll watch, and then we'll do some of these things in our class, but we'll be interacting with Microsoft engineers, and you can come with more detailed questions. So we'll have another guest speaker on Defender. We'll have another guest speaker on Copilot and AI. So one of the things you guys know is that you can have Copilot for your code, for your coding, right? And in fact, your student membership, your student accounts, the thing is we are not usually educated on this a lot, and that's why we'll have the Microsoft engineers come. Your student accounts have some licensing for Copilot, because Copilot is a paid thing. It's a paid thing, but they've actually enabled some of the features for student accounts so that you can play around with them when you're still a student before you go out as a professional and you have to pay for them, okay? So we'll also have a speaker on DevSecOps. And I can tell you this because Joylene, in fact, if you go to the Cybershuja YouTube channel, you'll see some demos we did with Joylene, and we literally worked with Snyk. That same one that Mordecai has asked about. We actually had a lab, a hands-on lab, where we worked with Snyk, and we integrated Snyk in the CI/CD pipeline, and Joylene walked us through that. So you can even go and check on our Cybershuja YouTube account, and you'll find that. We'll also have a guest speaker. We're inviting a guest speaker on the SIEM and SOA, Sentinel. So somebody who can just basically give us a really good detailed inside view on the Sentinel provisions as a SIEM tool. So such that by the time we're done with our 12 weeks, not only will we have covered the content on Microsoft Learn, not only will we have walked through what we can on the labs that have already been documented, you'll have access to engineers who work with these tools on a day-to-day basis, like that's their area of specialization, and we can come with more detailed questions. Even as they walk through the demos, and I hope this is going to be true. I want you guys to come with questions and engage them. Don't just let these rich resources come. They've given us an hour and they just talk to themselves. Like, I hope you'll engage them back. They're like, okay, I can hear your questions. Can we organize even for another session? I really see that you guys have a lot of interest. Or even they'll say, okay, let me take those questions and I'll come back to you with additional resources and additional information. So I hope after the 12 weeks, you guys will have had such a rich experience from this exposure to the Microsoft engineers. Okay, is that okay, Mordecai?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the thing we're trying to do in this first 3 weeks, and actually even into next week, is to give you a good overview of the security products that Microsoft offers, and then we'll get into the coding part. So for the coding part, we'll actually set up also an environment like our playground with a couple of vulnerable applications that then we will also be interacting with. We'll also do some API security, that's our plan. And you'll also learn how to deploy. So one of the first labs that I want you guys to do is a web app. So this will be the first lab, and I'll ask Lorraine to set it up. When I'm doing the demo, I'll talk about it. So your first lab will be deploying a web app on Azure so that you can have a feel of how that looks like and have it running. Is that okay? All right, so let's finish this part on Sentinel. So we've already emphasized the element of Sentinel collecting logs across user devices, applications, infrastructure. And something important here is Sentinel does this for, you can have connectors, agents on-premise, but also cloud deployments. So Sentinel can pull logs even on-premise infrastructure, and you have them in one central place. And we've said it also detects, so the element of alerting you where it has identified suspicious or anomalous activity. And the idea here is to minimize on false positives. False positives is when you get an alert that there's something wrong when there's really nothing wrong. So it will try and leverage on analytics, threat intelligence to be able to detect and raise alerts. The other thing, it will give you a platform to investigate. So one of the things that Sentinel gives you is a platform for raising tickets. Those tickets are assigned to security analysts that you've configured. Security analysts are able to do investigations and input their findings in their investigation. So you'll have all that on Sentinel. It has a section for that. And when they close, you're able to also generate reports, right? Yeah. And then the other thing that Sentinel does is the automated response, the SOA part. So you can configure what are called playbooks. And when you activate your playbooks, they will automate a workflow. The workflow is triggered, then it has specific actions it does until it closes, all right? And that will basically give you a response that can mitigate the issues, automated. All right, Copilot, security Copilot. So this is now not just Copilot for code, but security. So security Copilot, so whenever you hear Copilot, you just remember that's AI. So there's some element of AI integration. And AI, machine learning is within AI. I hope you guys know that. ML is a component, a sub-component of AI. So this security Copilot is already integrated. Remember we talked about security posture management? Some of the recommendations you get from that are generated by AI. That's what we're saying. When you see incident response, even the SOA features, some of those SOA features are actually through integrations with AI. Even the reporting has integrations from AI. So this is basically what we're saying. Copilot has been integrated into all these security features and security products. Now, the other one is Microsoft Defender. XDR basically is not just for endpoint detection and response, it's extended. The X is basically extended detection and response. And what I want you to see is that Defender is not only for cloud. There is Defender for Office 365. There's Defender for endpoint. Endpoint, when you think of endpoint, it's the devices. So if you have a laptop, that's Defender for endpoint. It has Defender for endpoint. If you have a mobile device that is being managed through the MDM, Intune, that's a Defender for endpoint, okay? Then you have the Defender for cloud. I think we've touched on that. And there's also Defender for cloud apps. There's Defender for identity. That's for identity and access management. There's Defender for vulnerability management and Defender threat intelligence, okay? So whenever you hear of Defender, it's just basically this whole solution. It's a suite that enables to protect you in all these different areas: detection, prevention, investigation, response, okay? So I think we're gonna touch on each of them one at a time. Is that okay? So let's walk through them. So Defender for Office 365. So this integrates with your Office 365 and gives you threat protection for email, for links, attachments, collaboration. Here you're already thinking of any of the, I think Teams, would fall under collaboration tools. But also please notice that they are paid. So you can see here there's a paid subscription. So this is not activated by default automatically, but there are some features that are built in, right? There are some features that are built in with the free plan that you can be protected on. So I think what is being emphasized is there's a default security policy. There are preset security policies that are activated. It will be giving you threat protection. Like if you think about email, quite a number of phishing attacks happen through malicious links. So one of the features that Office Defender for Office gives you is the safe links. Have you guys heard of safe links protection? I'll demo that when we go to Defender. And what safe links does is it sanitizes hyperlinks in email. So when users see a hyperlink, it's been sanitized through safe links. Safe links actually is like a sandbox environment. It will like run the link as if it was clicked, see what happens. And it will only forward the links that are safe to users to access. Okay. All right. Defender for endpoint I've mentioned. So endpoints are basically what you're thinking of in terms of the devices. Actually what I'd wanted to mention is, you know, the way many of you install McAfee or Kaspersky, and then it tells you to disable Defender. Do you guys think that is good or bad? So one of the things that is highlighted is that Defender for Endpoint gets threat intelligence from Microsoft. So if you're running Windows, who gets the threat intelligence first on what's happening to Windows machines? You would imagine it's Microsoft, because there's a telemetry, there's a way in which they collect logs from different Windows machines all across the world. And if there's a specific attack at targeting Windows, they'll see it. They'll most probably see it first. So the idea is, why would you want to turn that off? Like, unless you're really, really sure. So anyway, but the idea is it's always recommended to leave Defender for Endpoint running so that you can be able to get that pushed to your device. And any of the threat intelligence that Microsoft is seeing, is able to, your device is able to receive it. Okay, so anyway, I think you've seen Defender on Windows machines. It's one of the ones that is turned on and is recommended. Sindio? All right. Then we have the cloud apps. This is now the one you can see. This is for software as a service. It can also be enabled for software as a service. It allows for software as a service posture management, security posture management, and threat protection. And you can be able to integrate it into that, into your app, the apps that are deployed. Then identity, Defender for identity. And this has to do with your Active Directory. And of course, we talked about Entra, right? Entra for the cloud. And it's able to pick any of the issues relating to your user accounts and credentials, any attacks relating to trying to hack into accounts, right? It's also able to pick up on suspicious activities and suspicious logins and things like that. And you can see it has the Defender for Identity sensors on your domain controllers, and those actually pull in data and report to Microsoft Defender for Identity, okay? In case they notice any of that, they're able to pull that and report on it. Defender for Vulnerability Management. So these ones are able to scan vulnerabilities on, you can see Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, iOS, and also for network devices. So it has a database of vulnerabilities, known weaknesses, and it scans these different platforms for any of those. If it finds any of those, it's able to report for you to address the risk. So it's able to also prioritize the report and basically give you the ones that are high in priority that need to be addressed first, and basically ranks them. And it can also be able to track the ones you fixed and the ones you haven't, and give you that score. Threat intelligence, Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence. So this is basically that it's able to pull in the threat intelligence that Microsoft has and assist you in being able to triage. Do you guys know what to triage is? Triage is like if you go to a hospital and you want to see a doctor, you don't wait in the queue for the 1 hour until the doctor is free. You're usually within a few minutes taken to a nurse. And the nurse is able to quickly get your vitals to know your situation. That's what is actually called triaging. And depending on what the nurse sees in terms of your vitals, they can actually fast track you. And they can even give you a spot medicine. Like if you came in with very high fever, the nurse would say, okay, fine, just go sit in the queue until the doctor sees you. No, the nurse will immediately give you paracetamol. If they find that your blood pressure is very high, they'll immediately give you something to lower it, even as you wait to see the doctor. So that's the element of triage. So threat intelligence can give some triage to security analysts so that they can immediately apply some immediate remediations, even as they wait to see what the cause is, the root cause in their investigation. All right. So you can see there, the threat intelligence will give triad support, incident response, threat hunting, and vulnerability management workflows. Okay. So where is the threat intelligence coming from? It's coming from the Microsoft security team. So Microsoft has a security team that basically brings in a lot of information and tries to feed it in. This is what is basically the threat intelligence, based on what they are observing all over the world with regards to the attack landscape. If they see any attack, any threat actors that are doing something specific, they will provide that insight. They will also give you tools that you can use to strengthen your security posture. All right? And they will even highlight things of interest to you based on the understanding of your environment. So that's basically the threat intelligence element. Okay. Yeah. Then we'll look at the Defender portal that combines all this. So in fact, in our demo, where we'll be going is to the Microsoft Defender portal. It's called security.microsoft.com. So if you go to security.microsoft.com, you'll see an integration, one dashboard that brings all this together. Okay, so we're going to see that Defender portal and we're done. So what I'll do is let's do all the demos together. We'll do the demo starting on the portal, and then we'll go into Defender, we'll go into Defender for Cloud, we'll go into Sentinel, and we'll go to the Defender portal. Is that okay? So let us do this. So at least we've done this particular slide. We'll need to do another slide. Do you guys feel up to it after the demo? I'll need to be able to take you through. Hey, I'm tired, guys. I sometimes underestimate what I'm doing, but sometimes it can be very tiring. We need to do compliance. So if we can do this and I give you a demo on Purview, we'll have caught up. Lorraine, I really want us to catch up so that we're not running behind. And please remind me, Lorraine, when I do this demo, we'll do the assignment that I want you guys to do. So where do I start? Let's start from the portal. I have too many windows open. I'm just trying to get the right one. I apologize. So I got it. All right. So all of you by now have your Azure subscription, right or wrong? And you have a guide on how to activate your subscription. So in fact, I think you guys were lucky because Bethany came to this group. And then she showed us how to claim our credit. And I know I've already been consuming mine. So you should be having this subscription, Azure for Students. And you should be having $100. I have already deployed a VM and I've spent a bit. So I don't know how much I have spent. Ooh. So you can do a cost analysis. So Lorraine, in addition, documented the whole process. So thank you, Lorraine. And she's documented the whole process on how to claim your subscription, how to set up budgets, and how to set up alerts. So I have consumed already $0.22. Part of it is because I have a VM that I've already deployed, and the VM has some storage and a virtual network because I needed to demonstrate what I'm going to demonstrate right now. So what I wanted to show you is that when you're creating a resource, and that's what I wanted to show you. So we'll have a lab on web apps. That's the one I'm gonna give you guys. So when you're creating a resource, that's when you specify some of the things we've talked about in today's class. Like I'm going to be talking about the VNet. A virtual machine will have an IP address. That already tells you it's part of a network, right? Where is that network? That network by default initially will be on the cloud, in the Microsoft, a private IP address in the Microsoft cloud. that private IP address will not be accessible from the internet until you enable a public IP. So we'll be talking about the virtual network, and I'll show you that. Until you give the resource a public IP, it will be primarily just on the private Microsoft network in the cloud. But what you'll also see is you'll need to have some protections like filters, which are the NSGs, and I'll show you that just now. And ideally, you'll have no ports. But because you need to manage that virtual machine, maybe command line or something like that, or you need that virtual machine to be reachable using port 80 or port 443 because the VM is running a web app, that's when you expose a port. Okay, and when you expose the ports, you also still want to make sure it's not just exposing the machine to the internet is dangerous. That's why you might need to have, let's say, a gateway, and a lot of the gateways will also do some form of protection. Let me show you, like, even the, let me see if we can have, just a minute. Yeah, here's the firewall. So when you see the application gateway, it will do what we were talking about, denial of service attack, the denial of service attack protection, but also web application firewall. So this application gateway, you can even see here, it gives you these features, which you can later on check, and you'll see a cost associated with it later. But this is also where you activate it. What's the point I was trying to make? I'm not creating a new VM, but what I wanted to let you know is, number one, the VM gets an IP address, which is within a virtual network. If you want it to be accessible from the internet, you must give it an IP address, but by default, it doesn't have one, so that it's not directly accessible. The better way of doing it is that you enable, let's say, a gateway, right, that will be able to filter any traffic coming to that VM. So the VM is not directly accessible from the internet, but you can also put in a bastion host, right, that exposes port 22 or RDP to access that machine, but through the bastion host. Okay. Let us look at the virtual network. So the virtual machine that I created, I needed to put it into a virtual network in the cloud. The virtual network had a private, not a public, private IP address. And I also needed to give it some protections. And this is now the rules, whether they allow or deny some specific traffic. So these rules are for either inbound. Inbound is from the internet into my resources in the cloud. Outbound is from the resources on the cloud going outside to the internet. And these rules can either allow or deny. And when they're doing the allow or deny, they can be specific to 5 specific information points. So let me show you. I can add. This is an inbound rule. And the add section is here. It has popped up, if you can see it here. So what are the 5 things I can use to specify an allow or deny? The source. The source can be IP address. I can specify a source IP address. So I can even say my current address right now, the address I'm using. Can you see it has picked up? The address my machine is accessing the cloud is 4180.118.34. This has been given by my IP. I could specify the port. Which port am I accessing the cloud from? I can also specify a specific IP address. Right now, it already tells me my my private, and we'll go confirm this on the, so this was what, 10.10? You could see 10.0. So I think I'm in the 10.0. I'm on the 10.0 /24 internal IP, but we'll confirm that when I go check the IP addresses there. So these are already 4. Source IP, source port. Destination IP, destination port. Those are 4 properties. The 5th property could be in terms of the particular port. Now look at the service. Look at this. If I select HTTP, the default destination port for HTTP is port 80. If I select SSH, the default port is 22. You guys know the common ports, and then RDP is 3389. And it will attach that to a specific protocol. So that's a 5th property. And then I need to give it the action, whether to allow or deny. I need to give it the priority. The priority means the order, and the lower numbers are higher priority. If I put this as rule number 1, it will be the first one to be evaluated. Okay? Right. So you order them based on priority, with the lower numbers being executed first. Any questions? Does this make sense? So this is the demo for the NSG. So give me a second a bit. And can I invite you to do this on your side as well? How many of you have claimed your subscriptions? Can you follow along on your side, Lorraine?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah, so I just want to invite you, if you haven't been, you can just try and then you can ask me questions in case you are getting stuck. Can see a hand is up, which is good. Victor. Go ahead. You can unmute. Victor is talking, but he's not unmuted. Maybe Victor was, he didn't unmute. Okay, just give me a second, Lorraine. All right. So that's the demo for the NSGs. And so currently this is basically saying I can enable RDP, binding it to a specific source IP. Can add that. It will add the rule. And it's an inbound, meaning from my machine here to the cloud, I can run RDP. All right. So the other thing is you can associate the network security group to a specific interface, network interface. So I have a VM. Do I have a VM? No, did I delete it? I probably deleted my VM. Let me just come here. Oh, it's a Defender VM. It's there. Oh, I deleted it. Yeah. Yeah, could have seen the Nini. Yeah, sorry, I deleted the thing. Let me actually create it. Well, before I create it, just a few things. I just want to show you. I have a virtual network called Defender VNet. So this is the element of the virtual private cloud. I have a portion in the Azure cloud where I'm implementing my resources. I'm deploying my resources, right? So what typically happens is I create that network, and it's basically identified based on the IP address space. So currently, this VNet of mine is taking up the 10 range, and it's actually /16, but that's a bit too much. Because /16 means the network portion is the 10 and the 0, and the portion that I can allocate to my devices is the last 2. So I have quite a number of IP addresses. So maybe what would have been enough is the /24 instead of /16, but anyway, no big deal. So I can activate the denial of service protection on that network segment. Currently it's disabled. I can enable it. So that's where you do the setting up. Oh, where is it? And that would activate the denial of service protection at the network level. So do you guys remember we talked about that? At which level are you implementing the protections, right? All right. I could also protect using a firewall. So this is also where you enable the firewall. So I can add, and again, remember, this is not free. So this will be applied to my virtual network, and I can give it a name. So I can probably call it Defender Firewall. I was just looking for a simple way of naming them. So please notice it can either be basic, standard, or premium. Again, all this has licensing implications. So premium supports additional features like SSL termination, intrusion detection, and protection. So if it's basic, you can't change much. It will use the standard firewall policies. If it's standard, you can change this. Maybe you can use a firewall policy, you can enable some new rules and things like that. And what I'll do is I'll just have basic, and I'll use the existing virtual network, which is the one that I've already created. And I can associate it with a public IP address. I can add a new IP address. So I'll call it firewall IP. It will be, I don't want to have additional costs to it. I'll just use the normal one. So there's one IP address for accessing it publicly, but there's another IP address for management. And then I'm just going to use the standard pricing, standard feature. So I'll need to create a subnet, file management subnet. I can do that. I can do that. Let me just go to, let me open it in a new tab. And then what I'll do is I'll have a VM. I'll have to recreate it. I don't know why I deleted it, to be honest. I shouldn't have deleted it. So I'm back to the VNet. I've been told I need to make a subnet. So I'm just coming to the VNet. I'm creating a subnet. Notice the default is, I have two subnets actually. There's a default subnet, and I'm going to create a new subnet, which I've been told I must have. I don't know if I can copy this. Can I copy this text? I'm just wondering if I can do this range. Ta-da-ta-da-ta-da-ta. It has the first address. Ta-da-ta-da-ta-da-ta. Yeah, let's see what happens. It's not actually named the same way, but let's see. But subnets are basically a